Welcome to the Fear and Greed Business Interview. I'm Sean Aylmer. Bitcoin investors are having a pretty good week with the cryptocurrency heading towards a new record high this week. It's been a massive year for digital assets, more broadly, starting with the inauguration of a very pro-crypto president who even launched his own meme coin. And rather than dent demand, global economic uncertainty in recent months seems to have fueled investor interest in many of the cryptocurrencies. Locally, we had both sides of politics committing to a regulatory framework for digital assets during the election campaign. Plenty going on. Remember, this is all general information. You should always seek professional advice before making investment decisions. John O'Loughlin is the Managing Director of Coinbase Australia. He joins me in the studio. John, welcome back to Fear and Greed.
Great to be back.
So he put this back to Donald Trump's inauguration, but really it was going on before then too, because even the Democrats pre the US election were certainly warmer to cryptocurrencies.
Yes, certainly. And we had quite a large push in the US around identifying politicians who were pro-crypto, those that were kind of middle of the road, those that were conservative on crypto. And I think it's one of the first times that Silicon Valley has had a unified impact on the result of the election. And to my mind, that just speaks to the demographic and the demand for the product. You know, the train has left the station in North America. It is more advanced, I would say, in terms of adoption in that market. You know, you go into a motel and you turn on the TV or at a hotel, and there are ads, bona fide ads for all the big exchanges or the major two or three players on your cable news. I think in North America, we have over 100 million users. So it was a real election issue. But to your point, we already had some very positive developments with our legal case against the SEC, and you've now seen that with a number of players in the digital asset space as well. Those cases have been either overturned if they're on appeal, or they've won those cases outright. So it's not just this kind of bump from Trump. I think there were some good tailwinds there already.
We talk about Bitcoin all the time. Obviously, there are a bunch of cryptocurrencies. How far down, I mean, I'm not even quite sure how to describe it, John, but Bitcoin has credibility. No one's arguing that anymore. We were arguing that 12 months ago, 2 years ago. How far down the scale does the credibility flow? So Ethereum, Solana, some of those sorts of coins have plenty of credibility. I'm just kind of wondering where the cutoff mark is.
Great question. And I think if you're, very much in the world of DeFi and you're kind of what they call a degen and you're under 30, and you're living and breathing, prediction markets and playing Web3 gaming, and you are really on chain, you probably think the long tail of thousands of coins are relevant. But I think to break it down to your point, the vast majority of the market cap of digital assets is still Bitcoin, northward of 2/3. And then you have, I would say, 10 to 15 really solid, respected utility tokens that are emerging. And this is Ripple, Solana, Polygon, Ethereum, you mentioned a number of them. And they're all beginning to kind of position, some are going to kind of possibly outcompete some others in terms of providing efficiency on chain with gas fees, etc. Others are based around identity, others around intellectual property. Ripple's very much based on banking and kind of making more efficiencies in Rails. And so I think you've got that kind of handful there, and people are beginning to understand those, be more educated on them, and they're getting a greater share of the allocation of capital that people are putting to work in digital assets. And then you certainly have a very long tail of assets. And then there would be thousands of coins that are, I would say, highly speculative and quite marginal. Mm-hmm. I think it's important to note we have a pretty high bar for due diligence on tokens.
Yep.
We only list, around 400 tokens. And if there are some tokens out of Australia, for example, that we've listed that are really interesting new energy projects that have been, tokenized fundraising projects, Web3 gaming out of Queensland and others, Kane Warwick and his team, pretty well known. And, we literally go and do proof of life on the founders. And so it's a pretty rigorous regime. Other exchanges are listing tens of thousands of tokens. And so that world is very much kind of buyer beware.
Yep.
And a lot of it's in the wallet space as well. So you can't actually link a fiat wallet to that crypto. It's really crypto to crypto. And so, while that is all maybe not for the person on the main street, that is where the innovation is happening. And the future Polygons and Solanas and Ripples of the world may come out of that environment.
You've taken me in a path I didn't expect to go here. I mean, we talk about meme coins, right? But meme coins are a long, long way from a crypto token.
Absolutely. Meme coins are a cultural phenomena for an age bracket that is south of probably you or me. They are literally cultural speculative, opportunities. And much like baseball cards and Pokemon cards.
Yeah.
I don't know if you read, the FT, kind of their columns every day. And there's a big piece on these Japanese kind of fluffy toys that are taking the world, and they're $500, $600, $700. I mean, they're just across the way in Paddy's Market. Where is the inherent value in that item? It's really in the eye of the beholder.
Okay, so let's bring it back to Bitcoin. You said 2/3 of the value is in Bitcoin. Why is Bitcoin doing so well in these incredible times of uncertainty? Because in terms of how I think about Bitcoin, there's kind of a disconnect almost that it can be around a record level when you have so much global uncertainty.
Yeah, well, look, I think it's clearly a hedge against governments printing money and uncertainty. And there is one certainty in that the mining calculation and formula for Bitcoin delivers a finite amount of Bitcoin. And at some point in time in coming years, mining will cease. And then that asset class will continue to, you assume, appreciate in value if that demand is there. The real game changer for, this kind of digital war chest is who's been holding the Bitcoin. And so when the ETFs and other funds came into the market a little over a year ago, that absolutely changed the adoption. And, you'll hear people like Michael Saylor and others say, for every institutional buyer to buy Bitcoin, there has to be a retail punter who has to sell it to them. And so then, you kind of have this hodl, hang on, and really kind of guard your asset. When I talk to people out on the street beyond our retail customers, of which many of them are self-educated, they're young professionals, a group that we call Henrys, high earners, not rich yet, they're really looking to understand how they can unlock their own financial freedom and make sure they don't miss out on what may be the next kind of asset class. They probably missed out on venture capital, probably can't get into private equity that easily, rather. They've got into ETFs. Maybe their parents had some gold because they're from a country where gold is really important, like in India or the Middle East. And now they're looking at Bitcoin. Beyond that, you have a series of traders, people who have been in what we call TradFi for a long time. They've been currency traders. They've been commodities traders. They are increasingly skeptical about the structure of global finance and governments printing money, and they really want a hedge against inflation.
Stay with me, John. We'll be back in a minute. My guest this morning is John O'Loughlin from Coinbase Australia. Before the break, you touched on the idea that institutions were getting involved. What does it mean for Bitcoin when someone like the Future Fund or AMP starts talking about investing in cryptos? And then I want to get on to government regulation.
Certainly. I think it gives people a kind of stamp of confidence, to be honest, and nothing else. I mean, I was given an AMP investment product when I was born by one of my uncles and aunts in New Zealand, and I kind of redeemed this book when I was about 21, and it was worth a nice pretty penny. I mean, clearly their products have advanced from then. Others might say they need to keep advancing. AMP may even be viewed as one of the more conservative players in the market, but I think they are performing a very classic step in portfolio diversification. The amount of money that AMP have allocated to Bitcoin, and we're delighted to be working with AMP on their strategy, is really a drop in the ocean. I mean, it's percentage points. It's basis points of their overall assets under management. Yep. And in the case of the Future Fund, they're also looking at Coinbase, ticker Coin, as a stock, as a proxy to Bitcoin. And so I think also Coinbase's entry to the S&P 500 was an interesting milestone as well. And I think it just shows the sustainability of the asset class.
What about regulation? Some commitments were made during the election campaign. Where are we going on regulation in Australia?
Yeah, great question, and we need to keep moving on it. I mean, we've been pushing this with our movement called Stand with Crypto as we work closely with Canberra and governments all over the world. The new federal government, needs to be kind of held accountable to their commitments. It was wonderful to be having Andrew Charlton as the spokesperson for the digital asset industry within the Labor government. He now has some new positions, and he's a new, younger, rising member. But we really need Chalmers, the Treasurer, to step up to the plate and follow through on a bunch of asks. We think a task force in the first 100 days of government, which is very much coming up, is really important, working with industry. They've committed to that. We need to be acting pretty heavily on debanking. This is still
explain
an
that to me.
enormous issue. Okay, so debanking is when, because you want to buy crypto, or because you work for a company that makes its money from crypto, or because you're a startup in the Web3 space, you literally can't get a bank account.
Yep.
Or your banking services are handicapped or retarded. So right now, there's kind of a governor on lots of people wanting to put fiat money into their crypto account through the Big Four and many of the other banks. This even affects myself. I have a pretty decent set of financial products with a bank. I know people on the boards of these banks. Even someone who has been around the block and knows some people in the hallowed halls of the CBD. If I can't get an unlock for this, forget the guy out on the main street in West Sydney who just wants to dabble and trade in crypto.
Yep.
There are 24-hour holds. There's $10,000 monthly limits. It is absolutely draconian activity from the big banks who are just trying to add friction into the system because they're dealing with hundreds of other issues around the infrastructure of their own businesses. And that's been heightened by scams and frauds. I think the one thing I would really like to debunk, not debank, but debunk and demystify is this whole idea that crypto is just full of scam and fraud and people on the dark web using it. I mean, criminals are 7 times more likely to use cash. Less than 2% of all crypto is used in some nefarious manner. It's a much higher fraction for cash. And if you're on the blockchain, you can be found. And so we work with the Anti-Scam Centre, with the AFP, state police. We have a global intelligence unit fielding these requests to help law enforcement agencies all over the world. So this whole idea that crypto is this big kind of dark hole, it's really dated. And I think it's really not beneficial for Aussie consumers.
Fantastic, John. Thank you for talking to Fear and Greed.
Thanks a lot.
That was John O'Loughlin, Managing Director of Coinbase Australia. This is the Fear and Greed business interview. Remember, this is general information only, and you should seek professional advice before making investment decisions. Join us every morning for the full episode of Fear and Greed business news you can use. I'm Sean Aylmer. Enjoy your day.